And we keep wondering why these young people aren't coming home to the Democrats, or why blacks are not coming home to the Democrats. Because Democratic messaging is full of shit. That's why. And talk about cost of living. And we're going to help deal with this. And don't talk about in Gaza and student loans. That's so out. That the Harvard, that guy Delavolpe is pretty good. Give him 15 issues. You know what the number 14 and 15 issue were total? Student debt in Gaza. I forgot which order it's in. And why are we forgiving student loans for people that go to Harvard, which, according to Scott Galloway, quite accurately, is nothing but a hedge fund that has classrooms? Well, they got a $52 billion fucking surplus. Why are taxpayers going to bail these people out?
You just heard James Carville say what he thinks Biden should avoid doing in order to win back young voters and voters of color that he's currently losing. And what he says here is really important because if anyone can speak to the issues that young people and people of color care about, it's this 79-year-old white guy. Yeah. Now, before we get to the specifics of his strategy for Biden, let me just state the obvious right off the bat. He's obviously wrong about Gaza and student debt forgiveness. But with that being said, some of his advice is, pretty reasonable. He does encourage Biden to talk about the $15 an hour minimum wage, the cost of living. He even floated the idea of increasing taxes on the wealthy to create a program that benefits young people specifically. Cool. All that's fine. But with every reasonable suggestion that he makes, there's an equal and opposite one that's laughably stupid. For example, he wants the media and Biden to not focus on Gaza, as you saw, and instead focus on whether or not Trump has syphilis. I'm not making this up. So here's his message for the media and Biden with regard to that.
Steal Trump's medical records from his internist. And where are these medical records? Prove that you're fair. Ask him and keep asking him. And the same thing for the Biden campaign, because you and I are not stupid. We know why he stole the records. All right? Let me put it this way. We have a strong suspicion is he stole the records because he had the goddamn clap. And go to the Mayo Clinic or WebMD or whatever. I'll get a rash and I'll look it up on the computer. Go look up how insidious a disease that secondary syphilis can be. I'm not sure he's not having sex anymore because his dick may have fallen off from all the VD he has. Come up with simple, understandable, popular, proposals that people can understand where there's a distinction. Ask about syphilis. It's a relevant issue. Don't spin the polls, change the polls. Who cares what the poll is? What I'm trying to do is, it's like going to manage a baseball game in the fifth inning where you're down 5-3. Yeah, I know I'm fucking down. I'm trying to get 6 runs before and stop them from getting another one. That's what normal people do. It's a fact. You're behind. You're going to be 82 this year. It's a fact. But I'd rather be 82 and not have secondary syphilis than be 78 and have secondary syphilis.
Okay. So on one hand, I think it's good that he's calling out how the Biden administration is in denial about how bad he's doing with regard to polls, and he thinks that they should take polls more seriously. And there have been reports that Biden is disregarding the polls, so good on him for saying that. On the other hand, I think that he might be slightly overestimating just how effective this syphilis thing is. I mean, how many people does he think this is going to sway? 3 at the most? I mean, how many young people are there that are saying, you know what, I can't support Biden because he's complicit with genocide, although I'm going to have to rethink that because Trump might have syphilis? I mean, be serious. Trump having syphilis is very low on the list of concerns that I have with him. And look, maybe I'm being a little bit too nitpicky here, but could he not be bothered to wipe his mouth once before filming? I mean, he starts the video eating something, then gets shit on his face, and by the end of the video, he has not one, but two giant food particles on his mouth, and I guess he's just totally fine with it and couldn't be bothered to re-record. I mean, I would understand if this were a live stream because shit happens and there's nothing that you can do about it if you're already live, but this was a pre-recorded video that Politicon decided to upload to their YouTube channel for some reason, and he couldn't even be bothered to do this like one time. Am I crazy? I mean, this is somebody who every single Democratic Party politician and strategist takes seriously. His words are like gospel, but yet here he is screeching about stealing Trump's medical records and demanding that they talk about syphilis while he has shit all over his face. Like, is this a joke? Like, what are we doing here? Do we not have any more serious people that we can listen to when it comes to these types of things? But I mean, putting aside the insanity that we just watched, you know, it's not going to hurt Biden necessarily to be more policy oriented, but it's not really going to help him either, because the inescapable fact is that his support for genocide is specifically what's hurting him. And James Carville refuses to acknowledge that. And even though publicly Democrats are playing it cool about the election, privately they're freaking out because they know they're in danger. Democrats in vulnerable swing states have begun to distance themselves from Biden because of how bad he's polling in those states. And a report from Politico details how Democrats are in full-blown panic mode because nothing they're doing is moving the needle. And they're genuinely confused about why that's the case. And Israel does come up in this article, but it's brief and they downplay how damaging Biden's Israel policy is. And their evidence is a quote from Richie Torres, of all people. They write, quote, "This cycle, Democrats also have to contend with the war in Ukraine and the conflict between Israel and Hamas, which has deeply divided their ranks and contributed to a sense of chaos." Representative Richie Torres, a New York Democrat known for his ardent defense of Israel, was similarly concerned for his party, though he pointed to the higher cost of groceries and goods that started during the pandemic and has yet to abate. Quote, "The greatest political challenge confronting the president starts with an I, but it's not Israel, it's inflation," Torres said. "The cost of living is a challenge that we have to figure out how to manage." Well, I mean, letting the pandemic-era social safety net policies expire might be an issue, but of course Richie Torres is going to say that Israel isn't a problem because he's one of the loudest cheerleaders in Congress for Israel's genocide, so the only issue to him is that more people aren't enthusiastically supporting genocide as much as he is, right? So that's not going to be an issue to him, but voters just don't see it that way. And in Carville's defense, the Harvard Youth poll that he cited does show that Gaza is seemingly low on the list of priorities for young people. But what people like James Carville and Richie Torres don't realize is that the margins for Biden were very small in 2020, and all it takes is a very small percentage of 2020 voters staying home to tip the scales back in Trump's favor. But let's look at that poll from James Carville. So as you can see, 18 to 39-year-olds were asked to identify two issues that are most important to them, and 34% chose Gaza. Now, among these respondents, most of them did not rank Israel-Palestine as very high on their list, and that's not necessarily too surprising because voters always tend to prioritize issues that affect them personally as opposed to foreign policy issues. But what Carville doesn't want to admit is that 34% of young people who do rank Israel-Palestine as one of their top two most important issues, they care deeply about that issue. And 34%, that's no small number. That could be catastrophic for Biden. And the takeaway from this poll shouldn't be that young people don't care about Gaza, but rather that their interests are varied and they care deeply about a plethora of the issues, right? And when you look at the tens of thousands of people voting uncommitted in multiple states, that should give you a sign that there's something wrong, and the people who don't support Biden's policy in Israel, well, they're willing to stay home if he doesn't reverse course. And in order to win, Biden has to hold on to their votes, and he has to bring out the coalition of young voters and voters of color that he brought out in 2020 to win. And he's now polling badly because a lot of those same people who voted for him in 2020 are not coming back to vote for him in 2024 for one very specific reason. It's Israel, as explained by Harry Anton of CNN.
Among Biden's 2020 voters, all right? Because I think this sort of illustrates sort of how Biden's getting pushed a little bit. So if you like Biden on the Israel-Gaza war, look at that. He's getting 87% of the vote. RFK Jr. is getting 8%. Donald Trump way down here at 4%. But if you dislike Biden, if you disapprove of the job he's doing on the Israel-Gaza war, look at this. He's getting just 50% of that vote. My goodness gracious. These are people who voted for him last time. RFK Jr. is getting 20%. This is just a 30-point margin compared to a 79-point margin among those who approve of Biden on the Israel-Gaza war. This is a huge dividing line within the Democratic Party, and that's something, of course, we're seeing right now between the progressive wing and those more centrist or mainstream Democrats.
And as a confession, we're such nerds that occasionally Harry sends me some of this data. And the number that jumped out here, RFK at 20% among people, Democrats who voted for Biden in 2020 and dislike him on the Biden war. I think your next slide points to a little bit of what's going on here.
What exactly is cooking? Why do they dislike Biden on Israel? Okay. America's support for Israel is. Now, this is among 2020 Biden voters who are currently not voting for him. So it's those dislike, those disapprovals. Take a look here. Do you believe that America's support for Israel is too much? The clear majority, 60% of those folks who are currently not voting for Biden, but did last time around, say that America's support for Israel is too much. Just 24% say about right. You get this 4% who say not enough. But this group is double the size of the about right and not enough combined. And a lot of those folks at this particular point aren't necessarily going for Donald Trump. They're going for RFK.
I got to say that not enough is virtually nothing here. In general, what is Biden's support among those who were with him before?
Yeah. This, I think, is the key point. Biden versus Trump 2024 poll margin. The reason Trump's ahead, he's holding on to more of his base right now. That 2020 voters leading by 81 points. Biden's just holding on, winning among that group by 73 points. That's the story of this election. It's why Trump is in much better position than he was 4 years ago.
He said it best right there, and that's the story of this election. Biden is down because he's failing to win back as much 2020 voters as Trump is able to win back, specifically because Biden's support for genocide is hurting him. Now, it's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to lose, and maybe him pushing populist policies here and there is going to help him pick up some holdouts, but he's not just doing some progressive things here and there. He's also doing a lot of conservative things. His border policy is egregious and extremely xenophobic. But when it comes to Gaza, that's what's making a lot of people not support him. The people who care deeply about this issue care deeply about this issue. And him not taking their concerns seriously is what is jeopardizing his reelection chances. And to say that this issue has divided the Democratic Party is an understatement, because one portion of the Democratic Party is so outraged by Biden's actions that they are outright rebelling against him. There's a reason why he's getting protested every single place he goes. There's a reason why the DNC doesn't want to do a full in-person national convention. It's because they're worried about disruptions. There's a reason why people in his own party are saying things like this.
I don't need to tell you that you're on the right side. I don't need to. But I'll be damned if I wait 10 years before they apologize to all of you for doing what was right at this moment. Each year, our country, and I say our country because it is our country, sends billions of dollars to maintain an apartheid government and support the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. It is disgraceful that the Biden administration and my colleagues in Congress continue to smear them for protesting to save lives, no matter faith or ethnicity. It is cowardly. But we're not going to forget in November, are we? The International Court of Justice just ruled that the Israeli government must stop its invasion of Rafah. But President Biden says what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide. Where's your red line, President Biden? You all, every single bullet, every single gun, every single weapon, bombs that we send is a sacrifice of our own schools here at home. Many of which, when I go into the schools, have garbage bags over their drinking fountains because they don't have clean water. President Biden, I hope you hear us loud and clear. Attacking the authority of the International Criminal Court and interfering in the legal process is nothing more than an attempt to prevent the genocidal maniac Netanyahu and his senior Israeli officials from being held accountable for those crimes against humanity. You are an enabler, President Biden. But wait, you know when my colleagues are outraged? They're outraged over the protest on college campuses in our country. They're more outraged than that, than the atrocities happening right now on the ground in Palestine, the war crimes. Y'all, there's no universities in Gaza. We all know this. We say it over and over again. And now, if they get their way, they're going to silence the university here at home.
And that speech is so important because she's speaking to the rage that we all feel every single time we see more images of babies being blown up, followed by concern from the Biden administration, but yet no change to policy. And it's not just that Biden is complicit with genocide, it's also his treatment of people who condemn genocide. That also adds insult to injury. And rather than changing his policy, he's just trying to shield us from the truth. He's trying to ban TikTok, and as Ken Klippenstein reports, he's also trying to get social media companies to suppress pro-Palestine content. In other words, he's trying to hide the truth from us and gaslight us about what we're seeing, all so he can get away with murder. Literally. And yet he somehow doesn't think that any of this is hurting his chances in November. Isn't it amazing? See, he was polling fine before he started supporting a genocide, but then after he's supporting a genocide, his numbers go down, and they're not thinking, maybe correlation does equal causation. Maybe we should look into that a little bit, maybe examine these polls a little bit deeper. No, they just pretend like they don't know why any of this is happening. And then you have idiots like James Carville come out here with food on his face and say, no, he's losing because he's not talking about Trump having syphilis or some shit. It's definitely not Gaza. And then to make matters worse, you have other idiots like Morning Joe tell him not to believe the polls and that everything he's doing is fine and he's going to win and just keep continuing on business as usual. It's all fine. Listen, if Trump wins, this hubris right here that we're seeing will be why.